Hey everyone, so I recently did a presentation at U of I about MTSS for social workers and how SEL fits into MTSS being the multi-tiered system of support. And so I wanted to share a little bit about that because it can be confusing, but SEL should be part of your MTSS multi-tier systems of support that you provide in schools. So I'm going to insert a visual so you can see, but MTSS is a framework that provides targeted support at 3 levels. Tier 1 being the whole universal, you're targeting the most students, 80 to 90%. We're not going to talk about curriculum just yet, but if the curriculum is working, then your students should be seeing it, receiving, getting that information. Tier 2 is targeted intervention, so this is smaller groups, students that need just a little bit of additional support, and it should be between 5 to 15% of your students, no more than 15. If it's more than 15, then it's a curriculum tier 1 issue. Tier 3 then is your more intensive individualized interventions, and this might even include your special education students with goals. So that it should be 1 to 5%. Again, if it's more than that, it's issues with the curriculum, but we're not going to go into that. So the goal is to ensure student success, student needs are being met in not just academics, in behavior and social emotional. Those 3 things should be working together. So just a quick reminder, SEL matters. SEL, social emotional learning, is essential for developing skills in self-regulation, empathy, problem solving, and I'll insert a visual of the 5 things that we're targeting, but it needs to be part of the MTSS system. So in tier 1, students should be receiving all the students should be receiving consistent lessons that look similar in each classroom if it's the same grade level, and it should be moving forward. So the language that you used in 1 grade could easily be picked up in another grade. Tier 2 is those targeted SEL interventions for students maybe showing a little bit additional emotional regulation, things like anxiety due to academics and some behavioral challenges, sometimes due to maybe not having exposure like in kindergarten. It's their first time in school and they need support with working with other students. And then tier 3 is the most intensive support. The significant challenges could be related to disabilities. And so let's start talking about what it looks like, how the intervention should be given. So let's start with tier 1, right? The whole school should be receiving a consistent lesson program. It's not just about the curriculum, it's also about the delivery, how it's being delivered. Is it delivered at the same time? Is the language the same? Is the classrooms all talking about similar things? That is whole school, right? So it could be morning meetings, at the same time, positive behavior reinforcement in the classroom, like token system, lessons that are integrated, not just at one period, but throughout the day. You're talking about it, you're bringing it up. In our building, we use a second step. Not every building uses that, but that's what we've been using from K through 8th grade. And so I like that it's evidence-based and it's consistent because we're using it in every grade. Again, delivery matters. Another curriculum that we're starting to use and starting to creep into tier 1 is zones of regulation, because the language is being used frequently. And so if we continue to use that language, then it will be part of your tier 1. Tier 2 interventions, those are, again, focusing on like a little bit more anxiety, a little bit more conflict. It could be a small group skills, it could be mentoring, like an adult's coming, it could be like a check in, check out. There's a couple of ways of doing that, but this doesn't have to be a school social worker coming into and taking over tier 2's groups. It could really be anyone, right? If we're talking about MTSS, it could be an interventionist. It could be someone that comes into your classroom and does additional lessons. It could be the teacher revisiting lessons. It could be the teacher pulling students to the side and revisiting lessons and using that language and making sure that language is being used multiple times throughout the day, so there's plenty of exposure, because the worst thing we can do is assume students know skills. We cannot make that assumption. And then tier 3 intervention is, again, more individualized counseling. It could be the IEP is like a social worker working individually with students on goals. It could be wraparound services. If a student doesn't qualify for a 504 or an IEP but still sees an outside counselor, it could be a release of information between the therapist, the social worker, psychologist, working with the student individually. So that's the most intensive. That's the most time that the social worker would be spending time with a student if they were hired as a special education social worker. In some buildings, a social worker is hired for like the MTSS to provide SEL lessons throughout the building, for prevention. So if you are not part of the special education, you might not see the MTSS intervention part, but know that it needs to be integrated in your school. Academics is not the only thing that MTSS should be targeting. And we do a disservice to students by only talking about academics and not the social emotional part, because, for example, if a student is having issues with math, it triggers their confidence. Maybe students might notice, and I mean, it's all part of it. It still goes back to the relationship building, the emotional regulation, decision making, how they interact with others, self-awareness and social awareness, etc. And I'm going to end here because MTSS, there's a lot of acronyms, there's a lot of interventions, there's a lot of curriculum that could go into play, and it should be multiple team members in the building. It should not be just a school social worker, not just a school psychologist. It is a team of admin, interventionists, teachers having these discussions. So hopefully this helps.